Today I'm going to be continuing with my Everyday Extraordinary Heroes series, and we will be making our Canadian Sergeant at Arms, Kevin Vickers, who was the person responsible for taking down the gunman who shot Corporal Nathan Cirillo a couple of weeks ago here in Ottawa. It went unspoken in my previous video tutorial of Corporal Nathan Cirillo that I just posted, that he was a hero, and another hero from that day is our Sergeant at Arms, Kevin Vickers, and I have designed a character in his honor as well, and we will be looming this today. We owe him our great thanks and admiration. So today we'll be working on Sergeant at Arms, Kevin Vickers. To make our Sergeant at Arms, we are going to be using a standard rainbow loom in the offset position. And the bands we're going to be using are black, skin tone, gray, white, silver, and gold. And you will also need a C-clip and some beads or bands for your eyes. If you've seen any of my recent videos, you'll know that I've divulged a little secret that I like to keep. Not much of a secret since I've told everybody, but I always keep my broken bands because I use them for facial hair, hay, straw. They're also good for slipknot bands. They work very well. And something else I also hoard is bands that I've already used that I've had to take apart one project for some reason or another, but they're too stretched to use in a new project, but they're perfect for when you need to double loop your bands. This is just a small section of my bands where I kind of stash the current on-the-go ones, and they're soon to be replaced or filled into the rest of them in here. And that's not full, by the way. I don't have that many that I've taken apart. But you will notice that some of my white ones I will be using, the ones that I've already used, the silver and the gold. A few of those are also ones that are pre-stretched, but because we need to double them, they're perfect for that. We're going to start with the eyes first, and for that we won't need the loom. And I have misplaced my Easter basket grass, so I'm just using a piece of bead jewelry floss or twine or whatever they call it. I've threaded my 2 beads on this little piece. We're going to need 2 white bands and 1 skin tone. And we're going to take a white band and double it, and then we're going to take one end of this, I don't even know what to call it, twine I guess, and we'll tuck it through, and then we are going to slide 1 bead down and making sure we catch the end. We're going to slide the bead onto both pieces and then down onto our band. And we'll remove that, and we'll take our hook and place both ends of our white band onto the hook. And then we'll take our second bead that fell off, and we'll re-thread it onto here, and another white band, and double it, tuck the end through, and before we lose the bead again, we're going to slide the bead down, making sure we catch the end so that we can slide it down onto the white band. And we will put this on our hook, and as I mentioned, you can use bands for your eyes. And all you would do is take whichever color you're using for your eyes take that band and double it, wrap it 3 times around your hook, thread it onto a double looped white band, and you would do that twice. And then as we did for the beads, you would thread them onto a single skin tone band. And we're going to set this aside on a holding hook. And we'll do our next attachment, which is the ears. And for that we'll be using skin tone bands. And we're going to take a single skin tone band and wrap it 3 times around our hook, and another skin tone band and double it and slide it down onto our double looped skin tone band, and that will give us 1 ear. And we'll do the same thing again, a single skin tone band, wrap it 3 times around our hook, another skin tone band and double it, and slide those 3 loops onto our double looped skin tone band. And we will also put both ears on a holding hook, and we'll set this aside. And now we can do the nose, and we'll also be using skin tone bands, and we will take 1 and double it and wrap it 3 times around our hook, and take a second skin tone band and double it, and we will slide all of these loops down onto our double loop skin tone band, and that's going to give us our nose. And as you know from my previous videos, I attach my nose when I'm looping, so I'm just going to pull this up onto my hook and set it here out of the way so that I don't forget to attach it. And next we're going to move on to the baton, or whatever it is that the Sergeant-at-Arms carries. And we will use our gold bands for that. And we're going to need our loom, and we will be double looping these bands and using 1. We're going to go down the center pin, and we're going to repeat that 10 times down the center with a double looped gold band. It's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And next we're going to go back up to the top, again still using double loop bands, and we're going to go from the second peg in the center to the second peg on the left, and we're going to go down the left side 1 time from the second peg to the third peg, and then from the third peg on the left to the 4th peg in the center. We're going to do the same thing on the right side, a single gold band, double it from the second pin in the center to the second pin on the right, another double looped gold band going down the right side from the second to the third pin, and again from the third pin on the right to the third pin in the center. We're going to go down to the bottom, and we will do that again, and from the 4th peg from the bottom we're going to go over and down to the left, going down the left side 1 time, and from the left side to the center. And we'll do the same thing on the right side, a double looped gold band from the center to the right, going down the right side 1 time, and from the right to the center. And we're going to cap this last peg with a gold band wrapped 4 times around the peg. And now we can loop this, and we're going to reach inside our cap band, and we're going to loop once, And then we're going to reach in and grab the top 2 bands, which is technically just 1 band, but there's 2 loops to it, so we'll grab those top 2. And these are going to go over to the right, and we'll reach in and grab the next 2, which are going to the left. And then we'll continue on the left and loop up, and then loop from the left and to the center. And we're going to go over to the right side and grab those 2 bands and loop up, and then loop from the right to the center. And now we can continue looping up the center, making sure that we're grabbing both loops of the band and that we're forming our teardrop or raindrop shape as we go. And it's going to be tight, so be careful, you don't want to break these bands. They are double looped. And we're going to continue to loop just up to the 4th peg from the top in the center, where again we're going to reach in and grab the top 2 loops and loop those over to the right. The next 2 loops are going to go over to the left, and again we will continue up the left side, making sure that we're forming our teardrop shape. And then again on the right. And finally up the center for the last 3 loops. And again, this section is going to be tight, so be careful. And we can release some of that tension by wrapping our hook around the peg. And now we are going to take a single gold band, and we're going to reach into the top center peg, grab a hold of our gold band and pull it through, and we're going to form a slip knot, and we'll give that a gentle tug, being careful not to break the band. And now we can remove this from our loom, and you will notice that I did not use holding bands. And you don't need them here because we've double looped our bands and they're fairly tight, so they will kind of keep their shape and hold each other together fairly well. And at this section I'm just going to reach my hook in to release them from the peg, and then we will continue up. Again, being careful not to break the bands. And again, for the top section, I'm going to reach my hook in to release them, and then I can remove it from the loom. And this is going to give us our little baton that he carries. And I'm going to find my cap band, and I'm going to place my hook in through all the loops of the cap band, and I'm just going to straighten that out a little bit and tug it down so it has a little definition at the bottom of my baton or whatever this is he's carrying. And again we will straighten this out. It will take a little maneuvering, it can be done. Just have to play with it a little bit. And then we are going to tuck our slip knot band out of the way. And I'm just going to grab a finer hook, reach inside some of these bands, and grab a hold of the loop and pull it through. And I will do that again in a couple of spots. And we're just doing this to secure that loop out of the way and out of sight. And now if you're having the same issue I am with this curling on you, all we need to do is place our hook in through some of these teardrop shapes and give them a little tug to the top, and that will straighten it out so that it's not curling anymore. And we can set that aside. And now we're going to make the medallion around his neck. And for that we need, again, gold bands, and they're going to be double looped. And I'm going to take a single gold band and double it, and place it around the top peg in the center to the second. Again, another double loop gold band, and this time we'll go from the top peg to the left, from the left peg back to the center, from the top peg to the right, and from the right to the center. And again, we will take a single gold band and wrap this 4 times around the peg. And we can reach in and loop these, being careful to grab the top 2 bands that are heading over to the right. And again, be careful because it will be tight and you don't want the bands to break. And we're going to reach in and grab the next 2 bands, which are going over to the left. And then we can loop from the left to the center, from the right to the center, and finally from the second peg in the center up to the top. And this time we're just going to set this on our hook and set it aside. Actually no, we won't do that. I'm going to take a single gold band, double it, reach my hook inside, grab a hold of these 2 loops of that 1 band, pull it up through the first peg, and form my slip knot. Again, giving it just a gentle tug so that we don't break the bands. And now we can remove this from the loom. And this is going to give us our little medallion. For the chain, we're going to be using silver bands, and again, as I mentioned, these are bands that I've used on a previous project that I've taken apart for one reason or another. And we're going to be using 1 single band, and we're going to double it, and we're going to go down the right side 3 times. And again, each time with a single double looped silver band. We're going to do the same thing on the left side. Double loop a single silver band and go down 3 times. Now, were this for any other purpose other than what I'm using it for, if you can see how twisted these bands are, I would probably take my hook and wrap it around the peg to straighten these out. But because it's for a chain around his neck, I want it to have that kind of twisted look, so I'm not going to fix those. But I just wanted to point that out. And now we are going to take another double looped silver band and go from the left to the center. And again, we will go from the right side with a double loop silver band to the center. And for a cap band, we are going to take our medallion and reach inside the 2 loops of our double looped slip knot band, and we're going to give this a little stretch, and we are going to double this again, being careful not to break it, it will be tight. And then I am going to place this over the 5th peg down to be a cap band for my chain. And now what we need to do is reach inside and grab the top 2 bands. And if it makes it easier, you can stretch your medallion back a little bit so you can see where your bands are. But we want to grab the top 2 silver bands and loop them to the right, and the next 2 and loop them to the left. And now we just want to loop up each side, again being careful because these are double looped and we don't want them to break, and we want to also make sure that we are forming our teardrop shape as we go. So we want to do that for each side. And once we're done, we're going to take our holding hook, and I'm going to carefully remove this from my loom. Again, being careful because they are double looped and fairly tight. And there we go. We have, we'll stretch these out of the way as you can see. We have our medallion, and we can set this aside. And now we are going to loop the hat for his head, and for that we are using black bands. And this time we're going to use 2 black bands. We're going to go down the right side 3 times with 2 black bands each time. And we are going to cap this with a single black band wrapped 3 times around the peg. And we can loop this. And again, we will place this on our holding hook and set this aside. And now we are going to loop his legs and his feet. And again, we will be using 2 black bands and also going down 3 times with 2 black bands each time. And again, we will cap this with a single black band wrapped 3 times around the peg. And we're going to do the same thing on the other side for the other leg. Going 3 times down the left side, with 2 black bands each time. We will cap this with a single black band wrapped 3 times around the peg. And we can loop this, making sure that we're forming our teardrop shape and grabbing both bands as we loop forward. These we will also place on our holding hook and set aside. And now we are going to make his collar, or his tie, or I'm not sure what you would call it. His cravat, maybe? Is that what they're called? But we will be using white bands, and we are going to double loop them, and we are going to go down 3 times down the right side. And we will cap this with a single band wrapped 4 times around the peg. And we can loop this. Again, grabbing both bands and forming our teardrop shape as we go. And I'm just going to leave that there for now. I'm going to make the other side of his collar or cravat. And again, we will be using a double looped white band. And we're going to go down 3 times with a single white band that has been double looped. And we will cap this with a single white band wrapped 4 times around the peg. And we can loop this, grabbing both bands and looping forward. Now I want to remove this bottom one from the pegs, and I'm going to take all 4 of these bands on my hook, and I'm going to place this on this top peg. And I'm going to take another single white band and double it. And we'll use this as our slip knot band. I'm just releasing some of the tension by removing that up to this last peg. And I'm going to put my hook in, grab a hold of the 2 loops, pull it up through the center, and form my slip knot. And then we can remove this from the loom. And I need to straighten out this cap band here. I stretched it a little bit when I was removing it from the loom. So I'm just going to place my hook through all of the loops and just kind of twirl it or spin it around my hook. And that should even them out. There we go. And it looks like I have to do the same thing for the other cap band. Putting my hook through all 4 loops and just spinning them around my hook. There we go, and this will be his tie or his cravat, whatever it's called. And now we're ready to band our loom. We're going to start with his head, and we'll be using white and gray bands to give him salt and pepper hair. And we're going to be using 1 white band and 1 gray band at a time. So we want to start by putting 1 white and 1 gray from the first peg in the center to the second peg in the center. 1 white and 1 gray from the first peg in the center to the first peg on the left. And then we want to go down the left side 2 times with 1 white and 1 gray band each time. And it doesn't matter which order you put these on the pegs, it just as long as you have 1 of each color. And we're going to do the same thing on the right side. A white band and a gray band, a white band and a gray band, and a white band and a gray band. And then we're going to work on his face. And for that we'll be using skin tone bands. And we're going to put 2 skin tone bands going 3 times, continuing down the center. 2, 3. And next we want to use 3 skin tone bands for the neck, just to make it a little more sturdy. And then we'll move to the left side and put 2 skin tone bands from the 3rd peg to the 4th, and 2 from the 4th peg on the left to the 5th peg in the center. And we'll do the same thing again on the right. 2 skin tone bands continuing down the right side, and 2 skin tone bands from the 4th peg on the right to the 5th peg in the center. And we are going to go down the center 2 times with 2 white bands each time. And next we'll be moving to his jacket and his pants, and for this we'll be using all black, and I believe black is the last color that we're going to need. So we're going to start in the center, and we're going to continue down the center 3 times with 2 black bands each time. And now we'll move over to the left, and we're going to go from the 6th peg on the left to the 6th peg in the center. And we're going to continue down the left side all the way to the last peg with 2 black bands each time. And we're going to do the same thing on the right, from the 6th peg in the center to the 6th peg on the right. And then we will continue down the right side, finishing it off by putting 2 black bands going 7 times down the right side. And we're going to close off his pants. We'll take 2 black bands and go from the 3rd peg from the bottom in the center to the 4th peg on the left, and the 3rd peg from the bottom in the center to the 4th peg on the right. And we're going to cap this with a single black band wrapped 3 times around that center peg. Next we need to do his overcoat, and for that we'll be using a single black band, and we're going to start at the 6th peg from the top on the left, and we're going to go down 5 times. We're going to do the same thing on the right, a single black band from the 6th peg from the top, going down the right side 5 times. And now we're ready for our holding bands, and we're going to start at the top, and we are going to put a single gray band around the first peg on the left and the right, and the second peg in the center, a skin tone band around the second peg on the left and the right, and the third peg in the center. We're going to skip the third pegs because that's where our eyes will be attached, and we will put a single skin tone band around the 4th pegs on the left, the right, and in the center. Moving down, we are going to put a single white band around the 7th pegs on the left, the right, and in the center, a single black band around the 8th pegs on the left, the right, and in the center, a single black band around the 9th pegs on the left, the right, and in the center, and a single black band around the 10th pegs on the left, the right, and in the center. And now we're ready for our attachments. And we're going to attach the eyes first, and I'm going to put one end over the 3rd peg going down on the left from the top. I'm going to stretch it so that I can stretch one band around the 3rd peg in the center, and we will place the other end around the 3rd peg on the right. And I'm just going to turn the eyes so that they're pointing to the top. And we have our ears next, and one will go on the 2nd peg from the top on the left, and the other is going to go around the 2nd peg from the top on the right. And next we have the arms. And you've probably noticed that when you remove these from the loom, they kind of tend to have a natural curve in them. And I'm just going to make sure that I attach this so that the curve is pointing to the top. And we're going to put one arm on the 6th peg from the top on the left, and one on the 6th peg from the top on the right. And we can attach his feet, and one will go on the last peg down on the left, and the next is the last peg down on the right. And we're left with the hat. I actually want to try something different in attaching the hat, and I need to remove my holding band, and then I'm just going to slide these bands off the pegs. I'm going to leave them there, but I'm just sliding them off the center peg, and I'm going to place this band over the first peg, and I want to take my cap band, so all 3 loops of my cap band, and I'm going to place it around this top peg in the center, and I'm going to leave my hook there holding the other end. We're going to replace these bands in the order that they came off, or the opposite order from what they came off. So I'm going to put the first one going down the center, the next one was going over to the left, and the last one if I can grab both bands, was going over to the right. And I'm just going to leave this here for now. And I'm going to take my medallion and place it on a different holding hook, because I will be attaching this as I loop. So we are ready to loop once we replace our holding band around the first peg on the left and the right and the second peg in the center. And I normally start in the center, but this time I'm going to start at the bottom because we need to do our overcoat. And we're going to reach in and grab the bottom 2 bands, and we're going to loop forward twice on the left side. And we want to do the same thing on the right. We're going to reach in and grab the 2 bands and loop them forward, and we're going to do that twice. And now we want to go back to the left side, and we're going to reach in and grab the single black band and loop it forward. And again, we're reaching inside our holding band, and we're grabbing just the top single black band and looping it forward. And we're going to do that all the way to the top of the shoulder, reaching in and grabbing the single black band, being careful that we stay inside the holding band and that we're only grabbing 1 single black band this time. And again, one more time. We want to do the same thing on the other side. We're grabbing the single top black band and looping it forward, staying inside our holding band to grab that top black band and loop it forward. And we want to make sure that we're forming our teardrop shapes, and again that we're only grabbing the top single black band. And once again, we're just going to loop up to where we've attached the arms. There we go. And now what we want to do is reach into the 7th peg down, and we're just going to grab both of these single black bands and pull them to the outside of the peg. We want to make sure that our holding bands stay in place, and we're just going to do this 3 times on the 7th, 8th, and 9th pegs. And on the 10th peg, we want to move just the top black band. So again, we're going to reach inside and pull the 2 black bands of the single black band that we've just looped over to the outside. And we're making sure that our holding bands stay where they are. And we're just going to do that 3 times. And on the last one, we're just going to grab the top black band and loop it to the outside. And now we can move to the center, and we're going to loop up. So we want to reach inside our cap band, and we're going to grab the top 2 black bands and loop them over to the right. The next 2 bands we're going to loop over to the left, and then we can continue up the left side, remembering to go down to the 3rd peg from the bottom to loop these bands. And we're just going to loop up, and again we're just going to loop to where we've attached the arms. And once again, we're making sure that we're grabbing both black bands and that we form teardrop shapes as we go. So same thing on the right side, starting at the 3rd peg from the bottom and looping those 2 bands forward, and continuing up to where we've attached the arm. And again, you want to make sure that you're staying inside the holding bands. And now we want to get our medallion, and we're going to attach our medallion. So we want to take, what we're going to do is we're going to transfer this to our hook. Those bands on. The next band's on. And what we're going to do is we're going to reach in to the arm and grab the bottom 2 bands, and we're going to pull them loose, and we want to slide just the first 4 bands over onto the black band before we loop it over the top center peg. And we want to make sure we have our 4 silver bands still on our hook. And again, we're going to reach inside the arm bands, and we're going to grab the bottom 2 bands and pull them free and slide our silver bands onto that black band before we loop it forward. And that will attach our medallion. And then we can go down to the bottom of the center, and we're going to loop up the center. Now, and when you get to the first white band you want to loop, I'm going to place my hook down through just 1 or 2 of these gold bands, and I'm going to grab this white band and pull it free, and I'm going to slide. That's going the wrong way. I've put my hook in through the wrong way. What I want to do is make sure that I'm securing the medallion to the shirt or to his clothing. So I'm just going to stretch this white band over to the left side for now. We're not going to leave it there because I want to make sure that I'm going down through these bands in the proper place so that I can grab the white band and pull it through, making sure I'm not catching any of the gold bands or the silver bands, whichever I've gone through with my hook, and looping it forward around that peg. And that's going to secure the bottom of our medallion to our shirt. And now we want to attach our tie or our cravat. I'm not sure exactly what it's called. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to reach inside and grab these bottom 2 white bands. And actually I should have put this on my hook first. So I'm going to place this on my hook, and I'm going to gently tug it and double it. And I'm going to put my hook inside all 4 of those loops, and I'm going to grab my white bands and slide all 4 of these loops down onto those 2 white bands and loop that forward to the center peg. And that will attach this. And now we're at the neck, and we need to remember that we've put 3 bands there. So we want to reach in and make sure that we grab all 3 bands when we loop forward. And now we can reach in and grab the top 2 bands, which are going to the left, the next 2 bands, which go over to the right, and the last 2 bands, which go forward. And now we can go over to the left side, reaching inside all of those bands and looping the bottom 2 skin tone bands forward. And next we're going to have 1 white band and 1 silver band, or 1 gray band, sorry. And again we're going to loop, and we're just going to loop to the top peg on the left side. We're going to go over here to the right and reach in and grab the bottom 2 skin tone bands, and again we will loop this side just to the top peg on the right. Now I want to continue the center, and from the fourth peg to the third peg is where I always attach my nose. So I'm going to reach in and grab those two bands and just slide my nose down onto those bands and loop them around that third peg. And now we can continue up the center, reaching inside all of the bands and the holding band and looping the final two skin tone forward. And now I can go over to the left, and I'm going to loop these two to the center, and then to the right, and loop the one white and one gray band to the right. And finally, I will loop the white and gray band to the center. And now I'm going to take all four of these black bands and pull them down over top of this center peg, making sure that I've got all the bands on the side of the peg that they're supposed to be on. There we go. Now we need to double check and make sure that we have looped all of the bands. I believe I've mentioned before the top two mistakes that I commonly make are forgetting to loop bands and forgetting to put on the holding bands. So you want to make sure that you've looped everything, and it's sometimes very easy and clearly seen if you've missed any if you turn and look down the side of your loom. And everything's looped properly, so we can attach our slip knot band, and we're going to reach our hook down inside all of these bands, making sure we've gone through all of them, including the two black at the bottom and top. And we're going to grab our single black band and pull it forward. And we are going to form our slip knot just to the side of the hat. We're going to give that a little tug, being careful not to break the band. We can, of course, I broke it. But that's good. I wanted to show you that you can very easily use a broken band for the holding band, or for the slip knot band, sorry. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to line this up and even the broken ends, and I'm going to hold on to the broken ends so I still have a loop. I'm going to reach down inside, making sure again that I've gone through all of the bands. I'll grab a hold of the loop on my broken band. Maybe. There we go. And now I'm going to pull that loop up through all of those bands. I'm going to wrap my hook around both of those ends and pull both broken ends through my band. And I'm just going to give that a little tug. Loosen this up a little so I can tighten it. And there we go. And we can just tuck this out of the way when we're done. So now we're ready to remove this from the loom, and I'm going to start from the bottom and just very carefully remove this from the loom. And I'm just releasing the bands from every peg. And when I get to the arms and the neck, I want to put my hook down through the center of the peg and just release the bands that way. They're pretty tight on those pegs, and I don't want the bands to break. So that's why I'm using my hook to just roll it around the peg and release the bands so that they don't snap. And the rest should come off fairly easily. And again, for the last peg, I'm going to put my hook down through the center and pull it off the peg. And now that we've gotten this off the loom, I can tighten this slip knot band a little bit. And as you can see, he needs a little tweaking. So we're just going to straighten him out a little bit. Make sure that his eyes are to the front and that his ears are in their proper position. And stretch his hair up a little bit to define his head a little better. I'm just going to even up these bands a little bit. And now I'm going to tuck these broken bands out of the way in the back. Or if your slip knot didn't break, you can just tuck your loops out of the way so that it's just secure in the back. And now we need to attach our mouth, and for that we're going to be using a single skin tone band. And I'm going to place my hook from the back to the front in the general vicinity of where the mouth should be. And I'm going to grab a hold of one side of my band, holding on to it, and I'm going to pull the band through to the back, and then again I'm going to place my hook from the back to the front, and then grab the other end of my band and pull it through to the back. And now I'm going to secure both of these loops with a C-clip. And I can remove my hook. And you may want to adjust your mouth if, like mine, it kind of rode up his face and is directly under his nose. So I'm just going to grab these two bands with my hook and tug them down a little lower so that they look more like they're in the right position. Now we can do the rest of the tweaking. I'm going to squeeze in his waist a little bit to define his waist. I didn't want it as narrow as would have been had we used a double looped band there holding at that spot. So now we're going to define his shoes, and I'm going to place my hook down through the first teardrop and just give the bands a little tug to the side. And I'll do the same thing on the other side, placing my hook down through the center of the first teardrop and giving it a little tug. And that's just going to define his feet a little more. And now we need to adjust his tie, and I'm just going to pull it over where it belongs so that it doesn't look like it's off to the side, and it can hang down the front. And I can again adjust my medallion so that it's hanging properly. And I want his arms to be down at his sides a little bit, so I'm going to place my hook down through the teardrop at his shoulders, and I'm just going to tug the bands up towards his ear and the arm down towards his side. And I can do the same thing on the other side, placing my hook down through the center and just giving the bands a little tug towards his ears. You can also use your fingers for this, just grabbing one side of those loops and tugging the bands. And we're just moving. So I want to bend his arm at the elbow a little bit, and again I'm just going to place my hook down through the bands and give them a little tug. And that will bend his arm. And now I'm going to take the baton and I'm just going to take two of the bands of his hand, one from the top and one from the bottom, and I'm going to stretch them as I slide my baton up through those bands. And that's going to make it look like he's holding that. And something I didn't point out, but you want to make sure that the part you have facing front is not where you have woven your slip knot band in through the back. And now I have him holding the baton. Just going to bend his arm a little bit better. And we'll fix his tie again. And you can do whatever more tweaking you would like to do. And there you have it. This is our Sergeant at Arms, Kevin Vickers, who stopped the terrorist who murdered Corporal Nathan Cirillo, who was murdered while he was guarding the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier a couple of weeks ago here in Ottawa. So thank you very much, sir, for your service and for protecting us and keeping us safe, probably preventing a whole lot more tragedies that day. Again, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.